it's all in the wrist. When I was young, I got the chance to go see Joe Humphreys give a presentation, and I've met him many times since, but because he's just up the road from us. But he gave a presentation one time, and he was doing a casting presentation. He said, "Pretend you have a newspaper, stick that newspaper under your arm, and don't let it fall. Don't drop that newspaper from under your arm, and now fish." And that's the way I teach my clients whenever I'm guiding them Euro nymphing. Keep that newspaper tucked under your arm, and you control your rod angle with your wrist. Everything is in your wrists.
That was Shawn Holsinger providing a great tip to help on your next Euro nymphing trip. This is the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. In today's episode, I talk with Shawn Holsinger from Holsinger's Fly Shop. Shawn gets into some helpful fly tying tips for stoneflies and Euro nymphs, describes how he stretches his mind, and some tips on efficiency and proportions when tying. We get into the turd stone, the hot spot stone, the waltz worm, his favorite thread, and vise are all on tap today. Don't miss this one, as Shawn gives us the best resource you'll need if you're ever heading out to PA this year. So, without further ado, here's Shawn Holsinger. How's it going, Shawn?
Good, really good. How about you?
Good to have you on here. We've been talking for a little while, and it's great to get you back on here, or to get you on here to talk about some fly tying. I was just mentioning this off air that I'm going to eventually be going into a full fly tying season. So this is kind of the initial test to see, how it flows. And, I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of your home streams as well. But before we get into all the fly tying and how you built this, your YouTube channel and stuff, can you talk about how you first got into fly fishing and fly tying?
Sure. I'm actually 44 years old now. I started when I was 12. My father and I had a friend that my dad would work with, and he taught us how to swing wet flies 30 some years ago. And that got us started, which, we transitioned into, back in the 80s, you didn't have a lot of material and stuff out there, and flies were expensive, and you ended up tying your own flies. So we started tying right away whenever we got into it. And it's one of those things that, it's like most other things. You get into it and you get out of it, but you always come back to it. And I've come back strong this time. So
yeah. And the fly shop. So when did that start?
We've had the fly shop for right close to 10 years now. We've been in our building for about 7, but we was working out of a spare bedroom in my parents' house for a good while when we first got it started, and we quickly outgrew that. So,
So about 10 years. And then, you've been obviously fly fishing most of your life. You get into the fly shop. When did all the, you get into the YouTube? I know that's a big part of what you have going. Have you been doing that since you started?
Since we started the fly shop, yes. We kind of a little background on the shop, how we got into it, and it all got started. My dad was a commercial tyer for doing some tying for Eric Trout. And if you know anything about commercial tying, to be a commercial tyer and make any money at all at it, you have to be set up with the dealerships, and you have to be in line with all your suppliers, so you can get stuff at wholesale instead of having to pay retail. If you pay retail for it, you could never, you wouldn't be making any money at it. Not that you make a lot of money to begin with. Yeah. But one of our dealers was whiting. We were whiting dealer at the time, and Steven Tyler decided to put chicken feathers in his hair and started the big feather craze. Well, we were sitting there at the house, Dad was tying, and my dad is a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to fly tying material. And he was before we had the shop. Now it's really bad. But I can't say nothing because I have a big wall of it too. Yeah. But my dad was collecting a bunch of saddles and stuff, so he had everything for when he was tying. And I said to Dad, listen, you're sitting on a gold mine there. We should try selling some of these saddles to the beauty salons. And we started putting them online on eBay, and we were getting $500-$600 for.
No kidding.
Yeah, for, just a regular old pro grade saddle. And so my dad, being the wise businessman, he invested all that back into more material. And eventually, we started spreading out into different kinds of fly tying material. And that's how the shop came about, and how we started out we started out by selling saddles on eBay. And then we just started selling other stuff, and it just kept growing and growing to the point where we're at now.
Wow. So you started, so that's a pretty cool story. And now are you still selling to, folks like Steve and Tyler?
We haven't really sold. Every now and then we sell some overseas. We have some people that, deal with overseas customers. There's a little bit of that still going on overseas, but that's long gone here now.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, we might jump back into some of that a little bit later. I did want to get into a little bit on, try to narrow this down a little bit to, some of the stonefly. I know you have a few of your patterns, some patterns that are out there and things like that. But can you talk first, about, kind of when you tie, what you enjoy most tying, what types of flies?
I always, it's kind of funny. I'm not the commercial tyer, but I'm the one that actually ends up doing a lot of the tying for the shop. I can't sit down and do one thing over and over and over and over again. Commercial tying drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And I always end up going back to, I'll tie an order. When I'm finished with an order, I always tie a streamer or a stonefly is the two things that I like to tie the most. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny. My progression with my stoneflies has really changed with my tying ability and my mentality of fishing. I'm slowly working on writing an article. I want to call it The Evolution of My Stonefly, and how I started tying stones, old school way with feathers for legs and your woven bodies and that kind of stuff, and how it progressed into the synthetics with lively legs, or I use a lot of Hemingway legs on my big stoneflies, mm-hmm. and a lot of synthetics to make a real natural, realistic looking fly, but it's a shallow water fly. If I can't wade in and get it, I'm not going to fish something that took me 15, 20 minutes to tie. Mm-hmm. And as my tying progressed, and then I started getting into Euro Nymphing, and which I do a lot of now, my fly has progressed even further, and it's went simpler and simpler to the point where I have no legs on it now, and it's just a tail, 2 biot wings, and a body, and a little bit of dubbing for the thorax, and I catch way more fish on it because I'm getting down to the bottom quicker. And once you learn the mechanics of it, it's funny how I've progressed through my tying by progressing through my fishing.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I love the way you lay that out. And Euro Nymphing, we've had a couple of shows on Euro Nymphing, and that definitely is always a big hot topic. Gets a lot of listens and things. What do you think? If you think of, I mean, that's the thing. They're so simple, right? The Euro Nymphing, the flies thing. Are there specific, stonefly patterns just for that? What you would call a Euro Nymph, more of a Euro Nymph type of pattern?
Really, Josh Miller has a great one, the Beachbody Stone. It's real simple. My hotspot stone, which is super simple. It's just, two biots for the tail, stretch tube for the body, a little bit of dubbing for the thorax, and 2 pieces of biots for the wing case. And it's just made to cut through the water. So it has that, Euro style fly profile to it, and nothing to hold it back. Like, lively legs and Hemingway legs are great. They make a really realistic fly, but they act like a parachute compared to, a nice beadhead hotspot stone or something.
Gotcha. So basically there's no comparison. Even if somebody wasn't Euro nymphing, if they're just nymphing, when would be a reason to tie a nymph, a stonefly nymph that actually looks more realistic?
For me, it was a lot of, well, it's funny. I always joke around when I tie at shows. I tie at shows on the East Coast here. And when I tie, I always mainly tie stoneflies because that's what most people know me for. And when I'm sitting at a show, I'm tying with a lot of my synthetics and stuff like that, synthetic legs, because people want to see that because it looks realistic. It kind of proves the point that I have the ability to tie, but the motto of Euro Nymph flies is just keep it stupid simple.
Yep.
And the quicker you can tie it, the more time you're on the water, the more of it you're going to lose them. You don't want to be losing something you'd spent 15 minutes on. If I'm out and I spent 2 minutes on something, well, I ain't going to screw the hole. Let's just bust it off.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's right. That is. I mean, it's amazing. The Euro thing just seems like it just makes things so much easier when you're tying those flies. And how many patterns do you have? If you're thinking about your Stonefly nymphs. So say, I mean, for example, let's think what is your home, stream, or what's the stream that you might fish stoneflies in over there?
It's actually pretty funny. I actually fish stoneflies everywhere.
Okay.
Even if the stream doesn't have stoneflies in it, I still fish stoneflies.
Oh, there you go.
There's a stream in front of our shop, which is called the Prankstown branch of the Juniata River, and it flows right in front of our shop. The place where my shop was actually my great grandmother's farmstead there.
Cool.
And my dad inherited it. We built the shop there, and I grew up playing in that stream from as long as I can remember, playing under that bridge, and caught crayfish and everything under the sun out of that creek. And I cannot remember in my 40-some years ever seeing a stonefly in that creek. But I catch fish like crazy on a stonefly in there because of the presentation.
Okay, so I mean, this just goes, we've talked a little on entomology as well. Had at least one entomologist on, and I mean, does this all fly in the face of that? Does it basically just come down to doesn't really matter what insects are out there? It matters more getting the fly down in the right pattern, even if it doesn't match the hatch, sort of thing, or well, not the hatch, but the aquatic invertebrates.
I believe there's a lot to that. I think that there is I think a lot of it has to do with presentation, moreover than how you put the fly in front of the fish's face, rather than what you're putting in front of the fish's face.
Yep.
I think if you put it in front of the fish's face, it's going to eat. If it looks natural and it looks like something he would eat any other time, he's going to eat it.
Yeah.
So I totally feel that, like stoneflies, I'll fish them everywhere, just because I know that it's a natural looking thing to the fish. And if you put it in, presentation way over whatever your fly is, matching the hatch, most of my tying, actually, I always joke around, if you would put my box beside my dad's box, you would know whose box was whose, because mine's all flashy and hot colors and my dad's is all natural colors.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's all colors that doesn't really occur, under the rock in the stream, but I catch a lot of fish on it because I think it's just catching their eye and it's presentation.
And who catches more fish?
Oh, we have our days.
Yeah.
It's funny. I have a lot of the connections on the stream with guys, and I'm out guiding more often and stuff.
Oh, right.
And I have a lot of friends that are in the business or in the competition, stuff like that. And I've learned a lot over the years, and I pass it on to my dad, and he picks it up quickly. So,
yep.
Now hands down, my son outfishes us both.
Really?
Yeah. I've taught him how to fish, and he blows us both away.
How old's your son?
He is 16 now.
Oh, nice. Yeah, he's right in it. That's awesome. So he's out there and he's competing in that whole thing.
He did do a little bit of competing last year. He didn't do it any this year yet. I'm not sure. Well, we did do one tournament together this year. Yeah. That's right. But he's not the competitive kind of person. But unless he's out with people he knows, he doesn't like to compete against other people. But his friends, he's very competitive against his friends.
Gotcha. Okay. No, this is good. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely. It sounds like I'd like to. Definitely we're going to get into some more of the fly tying, but maybe before we get there, can you just chat about a little bit on, thinking about the Juanita River, I guess, there, your home river, just quickly how you fish, catch those on nymphs, I guess the Euro Nymphing style, what that takes. Is that pretty simple?
Sure. Actually, it's funny you said that. It's the Juniata River.
Oh, yeah. Juniata.
Juniata, yeah. Everybody from outside of the area
says Juanita.
Juanita. Yeah.
Because is it spelled the same?
No, there's no A at the beginning, only at the end.
Oh, yeah, Juniata. Okay, got it.
Yep. But no, don't worry about it because everybody does it.
I know. I was thinking when you said it, I was thinking, gosh, why did somebody name a river in the Spanish name? And so, yeah, cool. All right.
But it's one of those destination spots. It's a great river. It's very hard to fish. It's very pressured river. I don't guide on it hardly at all because I know other areas that I can catch a lot more fish at. And there's other areas. One of the rivers that flows into the Little Juniata when it makes the big Juniata is the Frankstown branch. Our shop sits at the headwaters of it, but probably 30 miles downstream from there, it's a mirror image of the Little Juniata, has the same hatches and no crowds. So I often, if it's the Sulphur Hatch and the Granum Hatch are two of the big hatches on the Little Juniata. And when they're coming off, you go early, you get a parking spot, you wait at your hole, wait for the hatch to come. And I like to fish. I don't, that's not my style of fishing. So I kind of shy away from the pressured water and fish a lot of other water and also it's a rather large, it's a river. And for me, sometimes in my head, I have a problem breaking a river down into a stream where I like to go fish my mountain streams and where I can break that water down, know where the fish is going to be, make a cast and catch a fish. When I get into a big river like the Little Juniata, I sometimes have trouble finding the small stream in the big river.
Right, yeah. So, and how big is the Little Juniata?
Little J is probably, some of the wider spots easily 40, 50 yards wide.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's pretty decent.
Yeah, it's a decent sized river. I mean, it bottlenecks down some, gets into some real deep holes in places, and it's a limestone stream, so it has good temperature, good water quality, and there's actually some books wrote about it. Like I have a podcast, and we had a guy on. We didn't get the episode out yet, but he was one of the guys instrumental in helping bring back the Little Juniata, to the quality it is now. Back in the 70s, there was paper mills and different things that just had polluted it to, it was, like Lake Erie, a Dead Sea. And it's now there's hatches there. There's incredible hatches. There's the Granum Hatch. Last year we fished a Granum Hatch, and I was talking with my dad, and I said, look at a film on the top of the water. And he looked at it and thought it was foam on the top of the water. I said, that's the casings of the hatch. Wow. Granums. There was literally a film of them floating down the water. There was that Granums.
And the Granums are, what type of insect is that?
It is a caddis.
Caddis. Okay. Yeah. So we're talking caddis. Yep.
Yeah. It's our first real hatch of the spring. Whenever you see the forsythia in bloom, you have your Granums ready.
Oh, cool.
So,
okay.
It's funny how you tell things by events, like Granums or the forsythia. 4th of July is Japanese beetles.
It makes sense though, because it's funny. We in a world, especially with this digital madness that we have, everybody's in this other world, but I mean, really the natural world is what all the other critters live by. So, it just it makes sense that we should, connect more to that. You mentioned the book or a book about the Little J. Do you have a name or of a book or some resource that somebody can find if they wanted to, to catch a few more fish there?
Yeah. If you give me a second, I can grab the book, but there's a lot of great books out there. One of the best books that I have used over the years has been Charlie Mack's book, Keystone Streams and Their Hatches, I believe it's called.
Oh, cool.
And it's from the 70s and 80s, but it's still, I think it was reprinted in the 80s or something. And it names all the streams in Pennsylvania and goes into, lists their hatches and when they come off and stuff like that. It's a great book. I can't find that book that I was thinking of. The author of it is, give me a second on that too, but it's Little J, Boomer and the Little J or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I
can track it down. I'll check with you and add it to the show notes if I can find it.
That's right. I'll find it here at the end and we'll get back to you.
Yeah. Okay, good. So yeah, no, this is good. So we're sort of moving along here, and obviously stoneflies, and we're talking nymphs. If we're talking on the surface, do you tie a lot of dry flies, and are there any stoneflies that you would recommend for that area that are kind of go-to stone? If there's a hat, well, I guess there is there. You mentioned there aren't any hatches on the Little J because there aren't any stoneflies, but are you fishing dries anywhere?
Well, there is stoneflies on the Little J, on the Frankstown branch where the shop is. We don't have any.
Oh, gotcha.
Actually, we don't really fish stoneflies here, especially in our area of the state. But I don't really know a lot of people in the Pennsylvania area that fishes a dry fly stonefly. We just don't have a real hatch of them. We have them in our stream, but we don't have like the salmon fly hatch out west or anything like that. So we have one picture I always have is one of the streams by our shop, which is Yellow Creek, and there's a fly fishing only section on it that's really popular in Bedford County. And there's a lot of stoneflies in that stream. And there's a bridge right by the New Frontier restaurant, which is a popular stop for the fishermen because it's right close to the fly fishing zone. Under that bridge, every summer gets covered with casings of stoneflies where they emerge, crawl up on the wall of the bridge underneath it, and emerge from their casing and fly off. But you never see the stonefly in the air. It's kind of funny. You'll see them, but you don't see anything feeding on them because it's not a huge hatch.
Gotcha. So it kind of simplifies it really for you guys because now you're under the surface, so that's easy. I mean, it's easier and then also you're doing the Euro style, which also makes tying easier. It seems like you've kind of simplified the whole process. I mean, so if somebody's coming in there new to it, or maybe they're struggling a little bit, you'd probably just get them into the Euro and kind of head them in that direction.
Yeah, we do a lot of Euro. Now, as the summer starts to roll around here, we'll switch more into dry dropper, a lot of CDC dries, and, just simple dry dropper rigs and it works really well because as summer comes, we're switching down into a lot of zebra midges, really small waltz worms, 16s, 18s,
Yep.
The CDC caddis or something, hold those up no problem at all, and you'll get a lot of takes on that too. So we have a lot of caddis in our area.
Yeah, so lots of caddis. Okay, and not as many mayflies. Is that a big part of the the food chain?
We have some really good hatches. We have some really good mayfly hatches. They tend to be more April, May, early June, and then they kind of peter out. Except for the blue-winged olives, we have blue-winged olives that hatch spring and fall. Great sulfur hatches here. Green drakes, you can follow the green drakes for about a month. They go upstate.
Yep.
They'll start around Memorial Day down Lake Bedford County on Yellow Creek, and every week it'll be Yellow Creek, the Little J, Penns Creek, Kettle Creek, just straight up the state.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's kind of fun if you want to plan a vacation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So on the, back to, the flies, I guess a little bit on the fly tying. So if you were going to, if somebody wanted to tie some stone flies, I guess maybe we can even start with the Euro kind of style. Do you have any tips to help, if somebody's sitting down and wants to, maybe they haven't done a lot of Euro nymphing. What would you recommend, for making sure they tie a good pattern?
Well, there's a couple keys to Euro nymphs. One thing is if you're Euro nymphing, you're not putting any weight in your line, so you want your weight in your fly. So, get a heavy enough bead that's going to get you down, and then
Tungsten
keep it as
bead.
thin.
Are they all
tungsten bead? Yeah, I haven't tied with brass in quite a while.
Yep.
And tungsten bead, get it down there and keep it thin. That's the big key, because once you start to realize that the wider you make it, the slower it falls. The slower it falls, the less time it's in the fish's face.
Yep.
So when you put all that in order in your head, and that's one of the hardest things I think when I started Euro nymphing, was understanding how now I'm fishing a single size 16 or size 18 fly. I'm not even fishing tandem a lot of time, and it goes straight to the bottom without any weight. And because of the leader system with the fluorocarbon tippet, the light weight tippet and stuff like that, it'll go right to the bottom. And that was hard for me to grasp and understand. But once I did that, then everything started to fall into place, and I started catching a lot of fish.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now you pretty much just focus on it. Are there other fly patterns, that you people, that still would work, that are, if we stick in that stonefly realm, that are, you'd recommend other than the Euro style?
Sure. If you get out of the stoneflies and get into Walt's worms, really simple, and actually Walt Young lives 15 miles from our shop here, the guy that invented it. So, there's a lot that's a really simple fly. Thread body flies. I tie a lot of thread body flies and just change the color to match the hatch. Just thread a piece of wire, a little bit of cocktail on tail, and dubbing thorax, and you're done. So just simple stuff. That's the main key to it, is you want to keep it simple and thin. And stoneflies are a blast to tie, but my main reason for tying them is just to stretch my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like, when you sit down and you tie the same wet fly 40 times, that gets kind of monotonous to me. So I want to think, well, how can I do something better? And usually it's a stonefly or a streamer where my mind starts to spin. Or I work part-time at Sheets Distribution. We have Sheets convenience stores here on the East Coast. And I work at the distribution center, drive a fork truck a lot. And a lot of times when I'm sitting around driving the fork truck by myself, that's what I'm thinking. Well, how can I do this better? It's funny that my mind runs on fishing. My wife drives my wife nuts. She has to start a conversation with fish, and then I'll listen to her. She says,
"Really? So you're always you can't disconnect. You've always got fish on your mind."
A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
But with tying, when I started tying 30 years ago, if you wanted to learn how to tie, you had to go to the local Trout Unlimited chapter, sit down with those guys, or hope you had a friend like we had that taught us how. And so there wasn't a whole lot of resources out there 30, 20, even 15 years ago. And, now the world's at your fingertips with the computer and YouTube and everything else. My channel alone, I have close to 270 videos out there.
Wow.
16. I just looked. I have 16 videos just on stonefly patterns.
No kidding.
And so I have 16 different ways to tie stoneflies.
That's cool. And what out of those videos, do you have any idea which one is maybe the most viewed, or is it the most popular, or is there one you would recommend for somebody to watch to learn how to do it?
There's a couple that I would recommend from anybody. A turd stone is a very simple, it's just chenille and rubber legs, and it'll catch you a lot of fish. The Euro guys use that a lot. My hot spot stone, which I have a video, and I tied it on Tim Camisa's channel too.
Yep.
So if you look up hot spot stone, that's a really good one. That's probably the one that I use more than any. And I use it for trout, smallmouth, anything, it catches fish. I love to use a stonefly for smallmouth.
Yeah.
I Euro nymph for smallmouth, and we kill them.
Oh, no kidding. So you go for smallmouth as well. And you're same thing. Are there any differences in smallmouth versus trout?
No, I Euro nymph it the same way. I find a nice riffle and that I know holds fish. And we actually have a river, the Racetown branch of the Juniata, after it flows into the Little Juniata and all that system too. But, below the Racetown Lake, they the big spillway there, they put a bunch of trout in it a couple of years ago, and I love fishing there. One cast you'll catch a trout, and the next catch you'll catch a smallmouth. You never know what you're going to get.
That's cool.
And it's all doing the same Euro nymphing technique, and stoneflies are a killer on it because it's just something that's natural and what they're used to seeing.
Nice. What do you have any? Had a couple of questions in the Facebook group. We have here, and one of them is on efficiency. I guess that's a common struggle with people. And I guess thinking of when you're tying, how do you not waste materials? Do you have anything that comes to mind when you get that you do to kind of avoid wasting materials?
Sure. I tie in stages. That's one of the biggest things I do to save material and save time. Is I'll tie in stages. Like since we're talking about it, my hotspot stone.
Yep.
I will put all the beads on. If I'm going to tie a dozen of them, I'll put a dozen beads on, and then I'll go in and I will. The hotspot on the fly is actually a ball at the back of the fly that I use to split the biots to make my splayed tail, and I'll make that ball orange or pink or whatever color I want.
A dubbing ball.
No, I actually use thread and then hit it with a little bit of UV glue.
Oh yeah, yep.
And so that's what I'll do next. I'll go in and I'll tie all the hot spots on and hit them with the UV glue, and then I'll tie the fly, because the rest of it's really simple. But tie in stages, because you're not switching, so that's going to make you more efficient time wise, and you're not jumping back throwing your material around. And that's one of my biggest efficiency thing is tying in stages when I have to tie a lot of flies.
Gotcha. And what about proportions? Is there any? I guess I'm not sure if that applies to Euro nymphing. Oh, I guess it would. I mean, but do you have any tips on making? Yeah.
Always pretty much half of what you think it should be.
Okay.
Is almost what I go with, because when I started, proportions was the biggest killer. My dad and I will talk about that with new tires. When we started, we struggled catching fish at the beginning. And when we started to catch fish, we compared the flies that we were catching fish on with the ones that we weren't. And it was the size of the body. It was, you always, as a beginning tire, you always have a tendency to make your abdomens too big and just put too much dubbing on the hook, or too much hackle on a wet fly or something like that. And you don't need to do that. You want to keep it as thin as you can. And it's not just Euro nymphing, it's everything, like wet flies. You're imitating a hatching insect, a swimming insect. Well, it doesn't, as it's swimming to the surface, it doesn't get fatter before it hatches from that casing. It's the same fish. It's the same insect, so you got to keep it thin.
Is there any other thing you would recommend as far as trying to get the right proportions on a fly?
One thing, you always need to know what you're tying. So I was a taxidermist for 10 years before we started the fly shop. And one of the biggest keys in taxidermy, the three main keys to taxidermy and being good at it, was reference. Mm-hmm. You couldn't recreate something if you didn't know what it looked like. So get a book, get whatever you need, search the internet. There's tons of pictures out there on the internet. You want to try to copy the real thing. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're just trying to improve the wheel. Yep. So, you know what I mean? Reference is the biggest key to it.
Gotcha. And
which I think is often overlooked fly tying.
Right. Yeah, no, I think people are trying to do different things, and that's good as well. But yeah, I think Kelly Gallup, who we had on in a past episode, made that same point, and having your fly. I think he's got a couple of videos on it too, where you should, you could hold the fly up in the pattern you're tying, and just see if it's at the right locations. You can see where to tie your thread on and where to do things like that. That makes sense. Your dad obviously was a big mentor for you. Did you have any other people, if you look specifically at the fly tying piece, that you think of as
sure, it would be Jack Igo would be our mentor that taught us how to fly fish, and he's I think he just turned 80 this year, and we've been going to Kettle Creek every spring with him for 30 some years now, and he taught us not everything we know. He got us into it, got our feet wet with it, and has helped us and always encouraged us. And for my dad and I, there would be no bigger thanks that we could give anybody in the fly fishing world than Jack Igo. But I've definitely been blessed with, in the past 10 years, a lot of the people that we've met along the way, being in the business. And like last month, I had the opportunity to get out and fish with Josh Miller. And Gordon Vanderpool is another one that really helps us along. And Gordon's a great guy. He's taught me so much when it comes to the Euro nymphing. And Josh is another, Josh and Gordon are both coaches on the U.S. youth team.
All right.
Yeah. And so I've learned so much from being around guys like them that, Josh just blows your mind away watching him fish. And that's what I said. I get to fish with a lot of those guys that Dad doesn't always get out of the shop for. So I ended up teaching Dad what I learned from them guys. But I would never be where I was. And And that's a big thing, with fly fishing. I always tell people it's minutes to learn and a lifetime to master. Cut the learning curve down and hire a guide and find out. I tried to learn nymphing on my own for 3 years until the point where I said, I'm not taking any other fly than a nymph. I'm only taking my nymph box because I'll never learn to do it if I don't. Well, I still never was productive at it. I caught fish, but I wasn't productive until I had one of my friends that knew how to nymph take me out and fish.
Yep.
And I really learned. So, surround yourself with good people, and that's efficiency. You want to be efficient fishing.
That's it.
Cut down your learning curve.
That's it. And if somebody was, wanted to go out do the Euro nymphing thing, other than, the fly tying, getting the right pattern, getting the right setup with your terminal tackle, if they're out there, any other tips as far as when you're getting into fish? I guess having the right rod. I mean, can you do it with just your normal 9-foot rod, or do you always have to have that longer rod?
The longer rod is a benefit to you. I have done Euro nymphing I've done it with a 7-foot 3 weight before, but you lose your casting, you lose a lot by having the shorter rod. I've done it a lot. I actually, I caught a real nice steelhead this year. I was Euro nymphing with an 8.5-foot 4 weight and caught a real nice steelhead on it. But I was doing the same exact technique, high sticking with inline indicator, just like a Euro nymph. And you can do it. It's just you don't have as much of the control. You don't have a rod specifically designed for what you want to be doing. So it's like going to the race. It's like being in a race and driving a station wagon, and the other guy's driving a sports car.
Right. Okay. So, for yourself, would you consider, if somebody asked you, are you a better fly tyer or a better fly fisherman? What would you say?
I would say I'm a better fly tyer. It's funny. I am a better teacher than I am a fisherman. It's kind of weird. I'll get outfished by my friends a lot of time who I taught the fish.
Oh yeah.
And I took one of my friends who is learning the Euro nymphing process and was teaching him, and I taught him some techniques that I'd learned on dry dropper from Gordon. And I taught him, and we were both fishing together, but, we were both fishing. I wasn't really teaching. I was just showing him what I was doing, and he still caught almost twice as many fish as me. So
Gotcha.
I'm a way better teacher than I am a fisherman.
Yeah.
I like to teach. It's just, I always equate it to, I had a friend that I turkey hunted with, and he never shot a bird. And I told him, I'm going to call in this bird and I want you to shoot it. And I called the bird in. I did everything. I put it in the lap. I did everything but pull the trigger on the gun. And, I in essence killed that bird, but he pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what guiding is to me. I enjoy that. I enjoy seeing other people succeed and learn. And
yeah. So
I would rather do that than out myself fishing.
And you consider it, you're a guide and not necessarily a teacher, and then what makes a good teacher or a guide?
Understanding, with a guide, you have to know everything that's going on with the crick. With a teacher, you have to understand what's going on with the person.
And are you both? Are you kind of both, or do you consider yourself more of a guide or a teacher? Or is it kind of the same?
Myself a little bit of both, but more towards the teaching side. When you're out with a client, you have to know if the client wants to hear stories or if he wants to tell stories. You have to kind of read your client just like you're reading your water if you want to have a good day on the water with them, and then know what they want to learn and what they already know. And, if they're the kind of person, well, I already know it all, I'm just here to learn some new water, you just kind of let them fish. But if he's struggling and you see he's struggling, you try to help him as much as you can. So it's a lot of reading people just like you read the water.
Okay. And reading people just is basically kind of listening, or, is there any secrets, any tips on that for somebody who, I guess, or is that something you're just kind of born with, that natural ability? Do you think, is that why some of the great guides are the way they are?
I think there's a lot to that. Yeah. Some of the guys are just natural people.
Yeah.
My wife, it drives my wife nuts. We'll go somewhere and I'll be sitting, in a park bench or something and just strike up a conversation with a guy beside me that I've never met before. that's just my personality. It's not my wife. My wife wouldn't make a good fishing guide because she doesn't feel comfortable talking to people like that. So you really have to be an outgoing person.
Yep, that's right. What about tying, I guess some of these Euro nymphs, as far as small flies, are you ever tying these things small, or do you have any tips on tying small flies? Is that something that, or are most of these standard larger size?
It's kind of funny. I said about Gordon here earlier. Gordon usually comes up and fishes with us in early May. And every year we'll start fishing as soon as the ice is out. And I usually start fishing big in the spring. And usually by the time Gordon gets here, I'm still fishing big and I'm not catching as much. And then when he gets here, he's fishing 18s and mostly like size 16s and 18s. Yeah. And then I slap myself and say, oh, why wasn't I doing that too? And start fishing the small stuff after he gets here. But I tie really across the spectrum on it, but most of my tying lately has been like size 16.
Yeah.
Has been an average. I know a lot of guys, I know one guy in particular, like Waltz worms. He'll tie a whole box full of Waltz worms in 16s, and that's the only thing he'll have with him, just in different colors and different weighted beads for different conditions, and he'll catch fish all day.
Yep. No, it's point I mentioned earlier, but Rick Hafley was an entomologist who was on in a previous episode, and he made the point. I can't remember the exact. I think he said if you don't have 50% of your flies, or maybe it was even 70% of your flies, your nymphs in your box aren't size 16s and smaller, then you might want to rethink, yourself. Because then also on with flies, you pick up a fly. I think people just think they're bigger. I think going smaller is probably a better place to err. Is that what you find? I mean, when you're out there, you put on, yeah,
definitely. And my larger flies, I fish in dirtier water. The clearer the water, the smaller the fly. And I take people with me all the time. And another thing that was hard for me to understand when I got into Euro Nymphing and I tried to preach to people, like perdigons.
Yeah.
Perdigon doesn't look like anything, but it catches fish like crazy. And you think, why does that perdigon catch fish like it does? Well, I'll take people out when I'm guiding, I'll lift up a rock and I'll lay that perdigon down beside a mayfly crawling on the bottom side of that rock, and it's the same exact profile. Doesn't matter what the color is, it's the same profile. And I think that's what the fish key on, profile and size over what it is, what color it is, anything. As long as you're matching the profile and the size, they're going to hit it.
Yeah, gotcha. And when you're fishing, if you're fishing that Euro nymph, are you casting, typically, can you walk us through that? When you make your cast, are you typically casting upstream and kind of working it down, or how you're stripping it back to you? How are you doing that?
Sure. I'm 90% of the time fishing upstream, occasionally across stream. If I see a run, if I want to fish the soft edge on the other side of a run or something. That. But for the most part, I'm fishing straight upstream, and a lot of times I will let my drift go the whole way through and fish it like an emerger. Fish it as an emerger coming to the top. So I almost always finish my drift, and I catch a lot of fish by doing that. A lot of guys will fish it upstream, pull up when it gets to them, and start again, and that's great. And my son is big on that because simple reason why my son catches more fish than I do, he sets the hook more than I do.
Oh, yeah.
And he's setting the hook on everything. And I'm more of an analytical person, and I'm thinking, rock. That might be a fish off the hook. Gotcha. Where he's feeling rock and setting the hook.
So are you pretty much, when you're fishing these, are you pretty much just bumping all the way down, or how do you keep from getting, are you getting snagged much and all that?
I'm not usually getting snagged. I'm trying to keep it right above above the rod.
And that's usually where the longer rod comes into play, where you can really control. You don't want it to be just dragging the bottom. You want it to be just kind of touching it every once in a while.
Exactly. And you're controlling that with your wrist and your angle of your rod.
Do you get tired? Do you get tired at all? Is that something with that long rod where are you holding it kind of above your head for the most part, or as high as you can?
I try to teach people, Gordon that taught me how to Euro nymph, he always calls that the Statue of Liberty when they're holding it up high like that. You wear yourself out.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that. And what they'll teach the youth team, and he's taught my son this, and it's all in the wrist. When I was young, I got the chance to go see Joe Humphreys give a presentation, and I've met him many times since, but because he's just up the road from us. But he gave a presentation one time, and he was doing a casting presentation. He said, "Pretend you have a newspaper, stick that newspaper under your arm, and don't let it fall. Don't drop that newspaper from under your arm, and now fish." And that's the way I teach my clients whenever I'm guiding them Euro nymphing. Keep that newspaper tucked under your arm, and you control your rod angle with your wrist. Everything is in your wrist. Your cast is in your wrist. It's all done with your wrist. You know, and your hook set is even snapping your wrist. So that's a lot of my rod angle comes from, you know, if I'm fishing a deep hole, I want it straight up and down. I'm gonna keep my rod tip up so I get it straight up and down. If I'm fishing a fast run, I'll cast it upstream, and I'm gonna keep an angle straight out, a little bit more straight out, where I'm gonna fish a belly in my line and watch for the belly to rise. So, you know, it's all rod angle with your wrist. It saves your arm, and I can fish all day that way.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yeah, that's a good tip to remember. Yeah. And Joe Humphreys, he was on. We had him on in episode 73, and yeah, we talked about the wrist a little bit more on the casting because, you know, we talked about how some people teach, you know, or at least how I first learned is you try to not break your wrist, but he really talked about how he uses his wrist in the cast, and that really helps, especially I think we started talking about the wind, how especially in the wind, you can bust through the wind by, you know, really kind of hitting into it with your wrist. So, yeah, Joe's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I do a lot of water load casts, and it's all snapping my wrist, you know, casting it downstream.
Like sidearm sort of thing?
Letting it load up and just snap your wrist wherever you want it to go. And you can be real particular with your placement of your fly, and you can do a nice tuck cast that way too when you snap it up like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is cool. I want to touch just briefly. You mentioned the competition, and your podcast. What is it? Beer. What's the name of your new podcast?
Bugs and Beard Podcast.
Yeah, Bugs and Beard. I love it, because you have a nice healthy beard, right? Or do you?
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, I do, and a bunch of the guys at the shop we got some pretty good beards going on. So we get together and tie.
Yeah.
Usually in fall, and so that's kind of why we named it Bugs and Beards. We got that name.
That's cool. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that. We talked about this a little bit on the competition, and it was interesting because on a past episode, I had this guest that brought up. It's funny because at the time it was earlier on. It was I hadn't talked about competition or even really thought, because I haven't been in any competition fly fishing. But he brought up the point of how he thought it was kind of, you know, like almost he was against, you know, like competition fly fishing's bad for the sport of fly fishing. And I didn't really think much about it. But the funny thing is, now I've talked to almost 80 guests, I'm realizing that I think that's the minority. Most people just realize it's, you know, if people are into it, there's some cool things about it. What is the thing about with you and the competition, and you have your kid, or you've been connected to it? What do people love most about it?
Well, I think catching fish, that's probably what people love the most.
Yeah.
It's just such a productive method, and you get to learn from people who catch a bunch of fish. And so and it's funny that everybody's constantly learning. It's always something new every year. You know, when they have the clinics and stuff like that, they're always teaching something new that they learned from the Czechs or the Poles, or when they were overseas fishing. It's not, like I said about golf, learning to master. Well, golf is golf. Golf is a lot of muscle memory, and it's just trying to get that perfect muscle memory. Well, here, fishing is completely different in that, well, there's a new technique. We can drift your fly a different way to present it to the fish differently that makes them more susceptible to eating it or something. Like, there's always something new coming down the line, and that's the cool thing about the competition fly fishing, is those guys are always learning, always trying something new, and that's my mentality. I'm always trying to learn something new, studying something, you know,
testing, right?
I get bored easily, and like right now, one of my kicks, every now and then you got to get away from the fly tying when you do it as much as I do. Right now, I'm playing around with making my own knives just for fun, just to get a little break.
Yeah.
And so it's just me trying to figure out keeping my mind busy. That's
Yeah.
just the way I am. But fly fishing is that, there's so many. You can fish a fly as a nymph. You can fish it as a merger, a dry fly, a spinner. Like one fly comes off and you can fish it 4 different ways.
Yeah.
And you have to know what that is when you're on the water, which way they want to take it. That's why I love the sport so much, because there's so much thought that goes into it.
Yeah, totally. Is making knife, is that pretty straightforward, or you're talking about you actually take a piece of steel and build and build the handle?
I haven't got into the forging yet. Right now I'm making them out of files because you don't have to heat treat them and stuff like that. So I've been grinding them down on files and making handles for them, and it's been a lot of fun. But like I said, it's just something to
So you're
instead of tying a stem fly or something whenever I get bored.
Gotcha. So you're not selling the knives in the fly shop yet.
No, I'm not getting that good at it.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, we're getting pretty close here. I just wanted to check back on the Stoneflies, and I guess we've been talking a lot about the Euro Nymphing stuff. Is there anything you would add just to help somebody maybe with their, thinking about if they're tying up some Euro Nymph style flies or Stoneflies, and then also on that Euro Nymphing? Anything else you want to hit on that would help somebody?
Sure. Get out. One of the big things that I suggest is get out to the local fly tying shows. Join your Trout Unlimited chapter. Get around other people, because if you're not getting around other people, you're not learning from them. And, that was one of my problems when I started out. There wasn't a lot to get out. 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot to learn out there. I mean, there was, but it wasn't at your fingertips like the internet and stuff like that now. But get out there and surround yourself with people that know what they're doing. And it's a great sport. That's the thing about fly fishing. Like, 98% of the people on the stream are going to be more than willing to help you. Like, hey, what are you catching them on today? Well, I'm catching them on this. Do you have any? Here's one. That's the great thing, and why I love the fly fishing industry so much is like it's such a sharing and caring industry. The people in it are great people. But if you don't get out there and don't be afraid. Like, go to the fly tying shows. When I was younger, I was intimidated by the guys sitting behind a bench tying flies. Now I'm one of them guys, and I try to be as least intimidating as I can be. I want to talk to you. I want to share with you. That's why we're there sitting behind a bench, because we want to make the people on the other side of the bench better tyers, better fishermen.
Right, and you're there now with the YouTube channel. Obviously, you've got a good following there. Can you describe what your YouTube channel, kind of what, for somebody who hasn't been there, what they can expect, what it's all about, what you cover?
Sure. We cover a lot of things on my YouTube channel. I have a ton of nymph videos because I fish nymphs predominantly. I've been trying to do a lot more dry flies, but it's just, you get on YouTube, type in Holsinger's Fly Shop, and you're going to get to our page. But we do everything on there. I do some product reviews. I have guest tyers in the shop sometimes, and it's pretty much everything to do with fly tying and some fly fishing videos too. I'm trying to get into a little bit more instructional on-stream videos, but it's a little hard to self-shoot those. I can set 2 cameras up here at the bench and take care and edit everything myself for my YouTube video, for a tying video easily. But to get out on the stream and have somebody to put the rod down for the day
Gotcha.
That's not always easy.
No, it's not. How do you, when you're tying your fly, doing your videos, how do you choose what to do your next video on?
That's one of the toughest things. Like I said, I'm up to 270 videos or something right now. So, it's hard to come up with something new, and you have to copy from other people. So, and I tried my best to give credit when I do. And, but what I try to key on in my videos is I try to teach techniques, not so much patterns, because when you teach a technique, you're going to use that technique in other flies. And, if the technique today, let's say, is biot, splaying the tails with biots for stonefly. Well, you got your Prince nymph, you got other flies that you can use that on. So I try to stress technique over pattern in my video. And also, one of the other big misconceptions is when we have people come into the shop to buy material, they'll come in and say, well, I got to have this, 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 and this, because that's what the pattern calls for. Well, yeah, that's what the pattern calls for, but that pattern might be from Oregon and you're in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And it's a blue-winged olive, but the blue-winged olive in Oregon may be more of a gray and maybe more green here.
Right.
I'm just making something up here,
Oh,
but
yeah.
That you use what works in your area and you adapt to the situation. If you're tying and it calls for mallard flank and all you have is or it calls for wood duck, but you have mallard.
Yep.
That's close.
Right.
You use what's close and you imitate the pattern and not so much the color, because the color is not as big of a deal.
Yeah.
So I try to teach people in my videos, listen, this is how they tie it, but this is what I have here in the shop and I didn't have to go buy something new. So I'm going to use this. Use what you have is one of the big things I stress.
Mm-hmm. And getting back to those, the buy it tail, can you describe how, you might tie those in or teach somebody to tie those in? Is that a pretty, are there a bunch of different ways to do that, or how would you describe that? Is that something you could do over just by audio?
Oh yeah, sure. It's very easy. I take and I tie my thread on my string. I wrap it back to the bend wherever I want my tail to be. And the simplest way I do it is I put my fingernail on the hook and then I'll make a ball of thread right at my fingernail so it doesn't roll off. And I'll make just a small ball of thread and enough that it will split the tails whenever I get there.
Like
now,
10 wraps, 20 wraps?
Yeah, usually like around 20 wraps.
And what
just
thread
enough
are you,
to make it.
And what thread are you?
I'm a UTC guy. I like to use UTC, like 140 mostly.
Yep.
I tend to pull a little too hard for 70, but I'm going to admit it. But just make a little ball, and then I always hit that ball with a little bit of UV glue so that ball doesn't unwind later down the road when a fish hits it or something like that, to secure it in place. And then I tie one biot on at a time, and I'll tie on one side and make 3 or 4 wraps, put the other one on the other side, and then I'll wrap it back to that ball, and as it hits that ball, it'll shoot right out at like a 45-degree angle, and you have a nice split tail.
Right. Do you tie it on with a kind of, on those goose bite there, I guess there's a concave sort of way to tie them. Are you ever tying it the opposite? You always want those to splay out pretty much on most flies.
Yeah, I'll tie them like the two tops are the inside, so they flare out.
Yeah.
Okay. They'll be opposite each other when I tie those.
Okay, cool. And then what's another on? Maybe you can just describe your hot spot for somebody that doesn't have it. I'll put a photo in the show notes. But what does that? Can you describe what that thing looks like?
Sure. In that case, that ball, like on my hot spot stone, that ball is. I have 2 hot spots on it. The ball is one, and then on the other end, I usually tie it with orange thread, and I'll make the ball. And what's great is I do a lot of those hotspot stones with stretch tubing, and you change the color of the thread under that stretch tubing and it changes. So if you get an amber stretch tube, you use yellow under it, you got a yellow stonefly. You use brown under that amber, you got a brown stonefly, and you use black under it, you got a black stonefly. So you only need one kind of stretch tube and you got 3 colors of 3 colors of stonefly. So that's great. But then I'll come in, tie my whole fly, wrap my dubbing on for the thorax, and then I'll come in and just put a couple wraps of orange thread again to make a hotspot collar on it.
Yep. So there you go. So just a couple of hot spots. And the hot spots are just, does that signify anything, any natural sort of thing, or is that just strictly just getting their attention?
I think it's just to get their attention. Yeah. I think the contrast in color, like one of the craziest things that I found, I tie a black stonefly, even a little black stonefly. I tie the same way as my hotspot stone, except I tie it all black. And if I put 2 pink biot wing cases on it, I catch a lot more fish on that pink. Yep. I think it's the contrast. I think the contrast of the color there gives them something to pick it up easier. And that's the only way I know to describe it. But for some reason, just those 2 pink biots is enough.
Okay. And as far as the YouTube, we talked about, you mentioned Tim Camisa, and are there people out there that on YouTube you follow or you love kind of their style?
Sure. Tim is a great one. I fish with Tim, and
cool.
we have a lot of fun together. Another one is Tim Flagler.
Oh yeah.
Great. I mean, he's just incredible. His production skills is crazy when it comes to the videos.
Yep.
And there's a ton of good tires out there. Jim Masora. It's funny, a lot of them are the Pennsylvania area here too.
Oh, that's right, they are. Yeah.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. There's a lot of great tires on the East Coast here. But anyone out there, Mack Flies is a good one. There's a bunch of guys out there to watch.
Yep.
And, just look at them. If it looks like a good fly, match it. Lance Egan does a lot. Fly Fish Food. They've got a ton of videos out.
Oh, they do. So, yeah, they have a lot of Euro stuff.
Yep. So there's a ton. And I have to, like I said, with 270, I'm always searching for something new. And so, like, I look to Lance Egan and them guys for ideas, and usually I look to them for the ideas, and then I see, well, I don't have that, so I'm going to tie it this way, and it still catches fish. I'm sticking with the pattern, just changing with what I have.
Cool. All right, cool. Well, Shawn, I think we're about out there. I just got a quick little random rapid fire round here for you. This shouldn't take too long. Your favorite, or do you have a piece of gear maybe that doesn't necessarily have to be fly fishing, but it's kind of that you don't leave home on a trip without it? Anything come to mind? And I've had, in the past, I've had people say, a popular one has been a camera, the cameras, the waterproof bags, but I have. Is that
my thought right off the bat was the cell phone.
Oh yeah. Do you take your photos with? Do you take a lot of your photos with your cell phone?
Mostly with my cell phone. Yep. Yeah, I rarely take my cameras on the stream with me because I don't want to risk.
Yeah. And you don't bring I remember I used to bring a lot of times the old, waterproof point and shoot, but I mean, the cell phone quality is just like way better, I think, now than, I pick
my cell phone based on the megapixel of the camera. Not what it has.
You do. Not the other features. That's sweet.
Yep.
What's your phone? What phone do you go with?
I actually have a Samsung, so it's a pretty good one, but
that's
not top of the line.
Well, that's what they say. I mean, the Samsungs, I think, are better. Yeah, they have better video, or at least the photos better than the iPhone and stuff. So,
yeah,
cool. What about?
Now I do.
I would
say with the iPhone, that portrait mode is great for taking fish pictures.
Oh yeah,
there's a portrait mode on the new iPhones, and you just can't beat that for taking fish pictures.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool. What about your? Do you have a kind of a vise? What vise you typically tie with?
For years and years and years, probably 20 some years, tied with a Regal, and I love my Regal, but I recently, in the past 4 years, switched to a Renzetti Traveler, and for production tying, having that true rotary, you cannot beat it. I love my Renzetti.
Yeah. So you use that quite a bit, actually tying, using the rotary.
Yep, I use rotary on a lot of my flies when I can, especially woolly buggers and things like that. You just can't beat it.
Yeah.
It saves you a ton of time.
Exactly. Yeah, those are both. Yep. There's a ton of good vices, but yeah, it seems like those two companies are the ones that are at the top for a lot of people. And what about your vices, and your kind of, do you have any vices that are actually the things that maybe, in your life you've kind of, the other type of vice, things you've had to give up, maybe that aren't the best for you, or anything that you currently have, you do?
I would say fishing is my vice. So
I
haven't given it. Yeah, I actually hunting used to be my vice. And for a long, long time, I was a diehard hunter. And last year I didn't even buy my hunting license. I got to the point where I would sit in my tree stand and not see anything and think, man, I could be on the river catching fish right now.
No kidding.
And I kind of gave up hunting, but I still do. My wife and I are going to Africa next year on safari, so I haven't given it up completely, but for the most part, I gave up hunting so I could spend more time fishing.
There you go. I know it's tough. I haven't given it up. I still do a little bit of hunting, but yeah, I just, with the kids and everything, I couldn't do everything. So I've had to, slow down on the hunting as well, especially the duck hunting, which was one thing I was really loving getting into. I
do miss that a lot. I love duck hunting because you can sit there and talk to your buddies, and then you have to be quiet for a minute and a half when they come in.
Exactly. Yeah, you can a lot of hanging out. Cool. All right. Well, we're just about there, but I've been asking this question has been a fun one. As far as music, do you have any favorite bands or types of music you like to listen to?
Ooh, I'm an 80s country guy.
Okay. Well, now don't tell me 80s country. So that was actually 80s country is great because that was before the 90s when all the Garth Brooks and stuff really started coming. So you're into the like Hank Williams Jr. stuff?
Yeah, I like him. Oak Ridge Boys, Alabama.
Oh, Alabama, yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I just went to see Restless Heart. So,
oh, wow, yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, so I like the old
when
country was country.
Totally, I'm totally the same way. Yeah, and in the '80s too was that time when you had the real old boys that were still around playing. You know, they were kind of probably not George Jones, and those guys were probably having that was their drug, sort of the rough time, you know, for them. But okay, cool. Well, I think that's about it, Shawn. Anything else you want to hit on? I mean, it seems like we've been all around. It's always tough to focus on these things, but we've talked a lot about your home rivers and Stoneflies and the Euro Nymphing. Anything you want to hit on to help somebody maybe if they're going out there for their first Euro trip?
Just keep it simple. Go as thin as you feel comfortable with your leader to get it down as quickly as you can. If you're going to Euro Nymph, that's all. That's the key to it, is getting it in their face. And to get it in their face, you got to go as light as you feel comfortable on your tippet. So.
There you go. And what is light? Like how light do you go?
For me, I usually fish a 5.5x.
5.5, yeah. So you're and that's even when you're fishing a larger fly. Is that pretty much your standard?
Pretty much, yeah. That's where if I'm using mono, it's usually 3-pound test.
Okay, yeah. So you're fishing. Yeah, that's definitely light. And any tips when you get are you getting into big fish on these?
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, my son last year, he kept counting. I think he had 12 over 20 inches last year.
Wow.
That he landed.
And how do you avoid when you're using the light stuff? How do you avoid overworking the fish? Is that a problem, or do you break off a lot?
No, it's all, and that's one of the things you learn from competition fishing. It's all rod angle, keeping the pressure on them. If you know what, around here we call it walking the dog, where if he's downstream from you, you put the rod tip down and you pull him upstream. You use his body as like a planing board.
You mean pull him up, like point the rod at him, or point the rod upstream and pull up?
Point the rod upstream, like parallel to the stream upstream, and drag him. He'll act just like a planing board on a boat when you're trolling, and he'll just kind of go on his side and lay sideways, and you'll pull him to get him up above you where you can control him.
Yeah, up above. That's right. Yeah, you don't want to let him go down. Okay. Awesome. Yeah,
that's how you manage. It's all in rod angle.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. In the next 6 to 12 months, anything new we can expect from the fly shop, you or anything going on?
Pretty much same old at the fly shop. We'll add whatever new we can find out there that the people want, and YouTube, keeping that the same. And you probably see me at a few more shows this year. Like I think the month of March, I'm already booked up. Long Island, Pittsburgh, Philly. So I'll be around the East Coast here a good bit.
Okay, cool. This show likely will come out, I'm going to schedule this out a little bit, but it's probably going to be coming out sometime in, it might even be August, potentially, depending on how it goes. But for your area, is there, in July, August, what's going on as far as what would you recommend somebody, what would be their first fly to put on there if they're heading up that way?
July and August. August is the end of it, but July and August we are beetle and ant dried droppers.
Sweet.
We're fishing terrestrials then. You got to get on the bigger, colder streams, and we're fishing terrestrials.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're not going to hit on that. We'll have to leave that for the next one. But your podcast, I'll put a link in the show notes to that too. So I know you talk a lot about the competition stuff. You focus on that so far, but maybe eventually you'll have some more information there on some of these other topics. But if they want to find you, if anybody out here has questions, just holsingersflyshop.com.
That's right. holsingersflyshop.com will take you to our website, and you can get to the YouTube channel from there. You can contact me from there, and that's pretty simple.
Perfect. All right, Shawn. Well, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time to share, your little neck of the woods over there. It sounds like you're in the thick of it as far as the big fishermen and fly tyers. So I'm excited to hopefully get out there someday and maybe swing a few flies or do some Euro nymphing in your neck of the woods. But until then, I guess we'll all keep in touch with you on YouTube and keep up the good work.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. See ya.
Yep.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/94. Please click subscribe on your app of choice, or go to wetflyswing.com/subscribe. This will help us find a few more people and maybe help some people out there get into a few more fish, and we'll assure that you don't miss the next episode. Thanks again for stopping by and check out the show today. Looking forward to catching up with you soon and hope to maybe see you online or on the river.